To cure his first love's illness, my husband Adrian personally sent me to a mental hospital. With bloodshot eyes, he said to me, "As long as you are willing to donate your bone marrow, once she recovers, I will come to pick you up." For a full 3 years, I became his mobile blood bank and bone marrow reservoir until my life was in critical danger. On the day of discharge, he did not come. Instead, his special assistant arrived, handing me a divorce agreement and a check for $5 million. I laughed and slapped a paternity test report onto his face. "Look clearly, the son of your first love is mine. Return him to me, or else I will make the Gu family line extinct." $5 million? It's not enough for my precious son to buy a toy car. The heavy iron door of the mental hospital slowly closed behind me, emitting a dull boom. The sunlight stung my eyes painfully. I raised my hand to shield them. Having not seen daylight for 3 years, my skin was as pale as a sheet of paper. A black Bentley was parked not far away. The person who got out was dressed in a suit and leather shoes. It was Adrian's special assistant, Ethan. He walked up to me expressionlessly and handed over a craft paper file bag. "Miss Sherry, Adrian is very busy and cannot come to pick you up personally." His tone was formulaic, without a trace of warmth. "Here is the divorce agreement and a check for $5 million. Adrian says this is compensation for these 3 years." I lowered my head to look at the document. On the divorce agreement, Adrian's name was already signed in bold, flowing strokes, just like the man himself, always so superior. Compensation? I chuckled lightly, my laughter hoarse and unpleasant. These 3 years, I was confined like livestock, regularly having blood drawn and bone marrow extracted. Whenever Vivian needed it, no matter what I was doing, I would be forcibly pinned to the hospital bed. If I resisted, they would inject me with sedatives. If I went on a hunger strike, they would force-feed me. From a healthy person, I was tortured to the point of being critically ill multiple times. Now, Vivian's illness has finally been cured, and I was discarded like a used rag, despised and thrown out. With a mere $5 million, he wants to buy off my stolen 3 years of life, my body full of injuries and illnesses, and the hellish torment I endured? He is quite generous. I took the file bag and pulled out the lightweight check from inside. Ethan seemed to breathe a sigh of relief, thinking I had compromised. But in the next second, right in front of him, I tore the check to shreds. The paper scraps fluttered like a belated funeral. Ethan's expression changed. "Miss Sherry, what do you mean by this?" From my worn-out cloth bag, I took out another document and slapped it hard onto his face. The edge of the paper scraped his cheek, leaving a shallow red mark. "Go back and tell Adrian." My voice was not loud, but it was laced with the deepest hatred. "Look clearly, the child he holds dear in his hands, Vivian's son, is mine." Ethan was stunned. He picked up the report from the ground, and when he saw the words "paternity probability greater than 99.99%, his pupils suddenly contracted. This is impossible. The young master is Miss Vivian's. Can Vivian even give birth? I interrupted him with a cold laugh. "Return him to me, or else I will make your Gu family line extinct." After saying that, I no longer looked at his shocked and speechless face, turned around, and step by step, left this cage that had trapped me for over 1,000 days and nights. The sunlight fell on my body, yet there was no trace of warmth. $5 million? Ha, it's not even enough to buy my son a toy car. Adrian, Vivian, the accounts between us are just beginning to be settled now. With the few hundred yuan left on me, I rented a sunless single room in the urban village. The room was small and damp, but I didn't care. The priority was to nurse my depleted body back to health. Every day, I forced myself to drink the most fishy pig liver soup, forced myself to go out and sunbathe, forced myself to live like a normal person. The woman in the mirror had a sallow complexion, emaciated and bony, but her eyes shone astonishingly bright, like a cluster of flames stubbornly burning in the ruins. In just 1 week, some color returned to my face. As soon as my body improved slightly, I dialed a long dormant number. The other end picked up quickly, and a vigilant male voice came through. "Who is it?" "It's me, Sherry." I reported my former code name. "Rex, I need your help." Rex was a private detective I knew before marriage, righteous and highly skilled. The other end was silent for a few seconds, followed by a surprised and joyful shout, "Sister Sherry? You're alive. Where have you been these years? We all thought you." It's a long story. I interrupted his reminiscing. "Help me out, name your price." I asked him to investigate 3 things for me. First, all movements of Adrian and Vivian over these 3 years, especially Vivian's complete medical records. Second, my son Noah's daily routine, the kindergarten he attends, and the bodyguard routes for pickup and drop-off. Third, and most importantly, help me obtain a sample of Noah's latest hair. The report I threw at Ethan was one I desperately stole from the hospital a year ago. I need a latest one as courtroom evidence. No problem, Sister Sherry, your business is my business. Rex agreed immediately, but the Gu family is heavily guarded, especially around the young master. Someone follows him 24 hours a day. It will take some time. I'm not in a hurry. Looking at the sliver of sky outside the window, I said calmly, I've waited 3 years, I don't mind waiting a few more days. After hanging up, I left the rental room and turned into an internet cafe at the street corner. The pungent smell of smoke and instant noodles hit me, but I paid no mind. I need money, a lot of money. I skillfully turned on the computer and logged into a long-unused stock account. Inside was some private savings left from before marriage, not much, 100,000 yuan. But this was enough. These 3 years, although my body was in hell, my mind didn't stop. The only way to pass time in the mental hospital was that old television. Every day without fail, I watched financial news. Adrian thought he had destroyed everything about me, but he didn't know that my strongest weapon is my brain. Looking at the jumping K-line charts on the screen, my lips curled into a cold arc. Adrian, you will soon know what kind of person you locked up back then. My money grew like a snowball. In just half a month, 100,000 turned into 2 million. I moved out of the urban village and rented a high-end apartment in the city center, hiring professional nutritionists and rehabilitation specialists for myself. My body recovered at a visible speed. The former Sherry was returning bit by bit. That day, while I was doing rehabilitation training, the doorbell rang. Thinking it was the nutritionist, I opened the door only to see Adrian's gloomy face. He appeared more mature and stern than 3 years ago, dressed in an expensive handmade suit that accentuated his tall figure and imposing aura. When he saw me, a barely noticeable surprise flashed in his eyes. Probably the woman he had discarded like worn-out shoes had transformed so quickly and was living decently. That report is fake, right? He got straight to the point, his tone certain and carrying his usual contempt. Sherry, using such despicable means to get more money is ridiculous. I leaned against the doorframe, looking at him leisurely. Adrian's grand visit is just to discuss this with me? His gaze swept over my exquisitely decorated apartment, his brows furrowing tighter. Where did you get the money to live here? What tricks are you playing now? In his eyes, I should be cowering in a dark corner, wagging my tail and begging, waiting for his occasional charity. If I live a bit better, it's my fault. No need for Adrian to worry about that. I couldn't be bothered to waste words with him. Whether the report is real or fake, bring the child over, and we'll do another paternity test. Won't that make everything clear? You're crazy. Adrian's face instantly became extremely ugly. Vivian has just recovered, Noah is her lifeline. Don't even think about using such absurd lies to provoke her. Lifeline? It was as if I had heard the biggest joke. A stolen lifeline, does she even deserve it? Sherry. Adrian was thoroughly enraged. He stepped forward, fiercely grabbing my wrist with such force that it almost crushed my bones. I warn you, don't challenge my bottom line again. If you dare spout nonsense one more word, believe me, I'll send you back to that place from here. Intense pain came from my wrist. That familiar suffocating feeling of being controlled assaulted me again. My face paled, but my gaze showed no retreat. At that moment, a gentle female voice came from behind Adrian. Adrian, don't be like this, you're scaring Miss Sherry. Vivian was wearing a pure white dress, with delicate light makeup, her face rosy, looking pitiably delicate. She walked to Adrian's side, intimately linking her arm with his, and softly advised, "I know Miss Sherry has just come out and is in a bad mood, we can talk slowly." She looked at me, her eyes carrying the condescension and pity of a victor. "Miss Sherry, I know you hate me, but Noah is innocent, he really is my child. If you need money, I can give you another sum, just please don't disturb our lives anymore, okay?" One singing and the other harmonizing, inverting right and wrong. What a show of deep affection and righteousness. Looking at their closely dependent appearance, my heart was already numb, feeling not even a trace of pain. I forcefully shook off Adrian's hand and looked at them coldly. "Get out." Both Adrian and Vivian's faces became extremely ugly. "Sherry, don't be ungrateful." Adrian gritted his teeth. "Adrian, forget it." Vivian pulled him back, her eyes instantly reddening, aggrieved as if she had suffered a great injustice. "Let's go, don't stoop to her level. She, after all, has been ill for so long." She deliberately emphasized ill, reminding Adrian that I was a mentally unstable person. Adrian's gaze indeed grew colder. The way he looked at me was like looking at an unreasonable madwoman. He embraced Vivian and turned to leave. At the door, he stopped again, turning back to warn me coldly, "My people will be watching you, you'd better behave. Otherwise, bear the consequences yourself." The door was slammed shut, cutting off their departing figures. All my strength seemed drained, I slowly slid to the ground. It wasn't fear, it was disgust, a disgust deep into the bone marrow toward these two people. My phone vibrated, it was a message from Rex. "Sister Sherry, got the stuff." Attached below was a photo of a transparent evidence bag containing a few soft strands of children's hair. My tense nerves finally relaxed, and I replied with one word, "Good." The next day, I took that hair sample and my own hair to the most authoritative genetic identification center in the city. Expedited, results in 24 hours. While waiting for the results, I didn't idle. I hacked into the Goo Group's internal system. For me, it was effortless. Adrian probably never imagined that his wife, who only knew painting and was gentle and virtuous, was once a top white hat hacker in the country, codenamed S. In the Goo Group's financial system, I subtly planted a few small Easter eggs. Then, I sent an anonymous email to the Goo Group's biggest competitor and several financial media outlets skilled at sensationalism. The email content included several shady bad debts from the Goo Group in recent years, as well as preliminary evidence of tax evasion. These evidences were not enough to fatally strike the Goo Group, but sufficient to make Adrian overwhelmed and cause the Goo Group's stock price to plummet dramatically. After doing all this, I closed the computer and calmly brewed myself a cup of herbal tea. The game has just begun. The next afternoon, I received the new identification report. The results were exactly as I expected. Looking at the report, I dialed Ethan's phone. "Tell Adrian to meet at the cafe downstairs from the Goo Group building at 10 tomorrow morning. Bring his lawyer, and..." "Vivian. Who do you think you are? What gives you the right to order Adrian?" Ethan's tone was very rude. "You don't have to come." I chuckled lightly. "However, I just shorted the Goo Group stocks. If you don't come, I can't guarantee what I'll do next. For example, making some interesting things public." There was a long silence on the other end. I knew he would relay the message. Adrian might not care about me, but he couldn't ignore the Goo Group stock price. The next morning, I arrived at the cafe 10 minutes early. I chose a window seat where the sunlight was just right, allowing a clear view of the magnificent Goo Group building across the street. At exactly 10 o'clock, Adrian and Vivian appeared on time, followed by a middle-aged man carrying a briefcase with a serious expression, presumably the Goo family's legal advisor, Victor the lawyer. Adrian's complexion was poor, with dark circles under his eyes. Clearly, he hadn't slept well last night. The Goo Group stock price had plummeted without warning yesterday, already leaving him overwhelmed. Now, he had to deal with me, this madwoman. "What exactly do you want?" As soon as he sat down, he questioned me, his tone full of impatience. Vivian sat beside him, weakly leaning on him, her gaze toward me filled with vigilance and hostility. I ignored him and pushed a document in front of Victor the lawyer. Victor, take a look at this first. Victor glanced at me suspiciously and picked up the document. It was my newly done paternity test report. Victor's expression went from initial indifference to shock, then to gravity in less than a minute. He read it over several times, then looked up, his eyes behind the lenses filled with incredulity. Adrian, this report. He hesitated, his face ugly. It's just a forged document, what's there to see? Adrian snorted coldly, too lazy to even look. Forged? I laughed and took out another document, this time, Vivian's complete medical records from that hospital abroad 3 years ago, which Rex had obtained with great effort. Then please, Victor, take a look at this. I pushed the document over. Miss Vivian underwent bone marrow transplant surgery 3 years ago. To prevent rejection, she received high doses of radiotherapy and chemotherapy before and after the operation. I would like to ask Victor, how could a woman who received radiotherapy and chemotherapy sufficient to destroy ovarian function miraculously conceive naturally and give birth to a healthy child just a few months later? The cafe instantly fell silent, the air seeming to solidify. Vivian's face turned ashen in an instant, devoid of color. Her hand gripping Adrian's arm unconsciously tightened, her knuckles turning white. Adrian's body also stiffened. He suddenly turned to look at Vivian, his eyes filled with uncertainty and shock. Victor adjusted his glasses, cold sweat already seeping from his forehead. As a top lawyer, he immediately understood the lethal impact of these 2 documents combined. There must be some misunderstanding. Vivian's lips trembled as she forced a smile uglier than crying. Adrian, don't listen to her nonsense. Noah is our child, ours. Is that so? I looked at her leisurely and delivered the fatal blow. Then why not go to the hospital right now? You, me, and Noah, the 3 of us do a test together. Dare you, Miss Vivian? Vivian was completely panicked. She looked pleadingly at Adrian, tears falling like broken beads. Adrian, she's crazy, she just wants to destroy us. Believe me, you must believe me. Adrian looked at her, then at me, his eyes struggling intensely between doubt and ingrained trust. The 3 years of pillow talk were ultimately effective. In the end, he chose to believe Vivian. The struggle in his eyes was replaced by ruthlessness. Sherry, have you made enough fuss? He slammed the table hard, the loud noise drawing sidelong glances from around. I warn you one last time, if you dare harass Vivian and Noah again, I guarantee you'll regret being born. He thought threats could silence me. He thought he could still control everything about me like 3 years ago. Looking at his furious face, I suddenly found it somewhat laughable. I spoke slowly, word by word. Adrian, do you think I came today to beg you, to negotiate with you? I shook my head, the smile on my lips growing colder. You're wrong. I took out my phone and pressed the preset speed dial. The call was answered almost instantly. A steady and powerful male voice came from the receiver, carrying an unquestionable authority. Sherry, everything is ready. I said softly into the phone, brother, begin. After hanging up, I raised my eyes to look at Adrian, whose face had changed drastically. The good show is just starting now. As soon as the words fell, there was a commotion at the cafe entrance. Over a dozen bodyguards in black suits and sunglasses rushed in, quickly clearing the area and surrounding our table. A tall, handsome man with a sharp, knife-like temperament, escorted by a group, slowly walked in. He went straight to my side, took off his suit jacket, and gently draped it over my shoulders, his actions natural and indulgent. Why are you wearing so little? What if you catch a cold? Then, he lifted his head, his icy gaze sweeping over the stunned Adrian and Vivian. So it's you who bullied my sister Leon? Leon. This name exploded like a heavy bomb in Adrian's mind. The color drained completely from his face. Shocked, he looked at me, then at the powerful man beside me, his lips trembling, unable to say a word. The Shin family of the capital, a true century-old aristocratic family standing at the pinnacle, with industries spanning the globe, yet exceptionally low-key in conduct, an existence that even the Gu family had to look up to. And Leon was the most prominent heir of this generation in the Shin family, renowned in the entire upper class for his ruthless methods and extreme protectiveness. Adrian never dreamed that the woman he had locked in a mental hospital for 3 years and casually trampled upon would be the Shin family's daughter, Leon's own sister. Leon. Victor the lawyer had already stood up, nervously wiping sweat, almost unsteady. This must be a misunderstanding. Adrian didn't know Miss Sherry is your sister. Didn't know? Leon sneered, but the smile didn't reach his eyes. Instead, it made the surrounding air a few degrees colder. If he didn't know, does that allow him to lock someone in a mental hospital, treat them as a blood bank and bone marrow reservoir, taking whatever he wants? With each word he said, Adrian's face grew paler. Vivian was already terrified out of her wits, slumping in the chair, trembling all over. Brother, don't waste words with them. I tugged at Leon's sleeve, my voice calm. I want my child. Okay. Leon nodded immediately, the sharpness in his eyes instantly turning to tenderness. He patted my head, leave it to me. He turned and ordered the bodyguard captain behind him, go to the Gu family and bring the young master over. If anyone dares to block, break their legs directly. Yes. The bodyguard captain accepted the order, took half the men, and left decisively. No. You can't take Noah away. Vivian finally reacted, screaming and about to pounce, but was firmly held down by 2 bodyguards. Noah is my son. Mine. She cried hysterically like a madwoman. Yours? Leon looked down at her, his gaze like looking at a clown. Soon it won't be. He turned to the already petrified Victor beside him. Victor the lawyer, right? You heard what my sister said just now. Illegal detention, intentional injury, forging medical records, child trafficking, these charges combined. Calculate how many years in prison for your employer and this Miss Vivian? Victor's cold sweat flowed down his temples. Adrian finally recovered from the huge shock. He stared fixedly at me, his bloodshot eyes filled with incredulity and a trace of regret. Sherry, why didn't you say earlier? His voice was hoarse and dry. Say? It was as if I heard the funniest joke. Say what? Say I'm from the Shin family, so you can treat me as a more valuable blood bank and scheme against the Shin family along with me? I didn't. He eagerly defended, I just wanted to save Vivian. So you can sacrifice me? I interrupted him coldly, Adrian, put away your ridiculous act of deep affection. You don't love Vivian, you just love yourself. You love the first love who got injured saving you, love the script that lets you play the devoted savior. You've never truly seen anyone clearly, including me, and including her. My words were like a knife, precisely dissecting his hypocritical shell, exposing the selfish and cold core inside. His face instantly turned as pale as paper. In less than half an hour, the bodyguard captain returned. Behind him was a nanny holding a child. The child had delicate features, like carved jade. It was my Noah. Not seen for 3 years, he had grown taller and bigger. He seemed frightened by the scene, his small body shrinking in the nanny's arms, a pair of dark, shiny big eyes timidly looking at us, filled with strangeness and unease. My heart felt like it was tightly gripped by an invisible hand, hurting so much I couldn't breathe. Mommy, he called softly, but looking at Vivian who was controlled by the bodyguards. Vivian immediately cried out, Noah. My Noah. Don't be afraid, Mommy is here. Seal her mouth. Leon ordered coldly. A bodyguard immediately stepped forward and taped Vivian's mouth shut. The world instantly became quiet. I took a deep breath and slowly walked toward my son. I squatted down, trying to make my voice sound gentle. Noah, baby, come to me, okay? Noah looked at me, his eyes full of confusion and resistance. He shrank further into the nanny's arms and shook his head. My heart felt another stab of pain. He treated me as a stranger, a bad person trying to take him away. All this was thanks to Adrian and Vivian. Leon came to my side, patted my shoulder, silently comforting me. He said to the nanny, give me the child. The nanny tremblingly handed the child over. In Leon's arms, perhaps the man's innate sense of strength gave him some security. He didn't cry or fuss, just opened his big eyes, curiously sizing up this strange uncle. Brother, let's go. I don't want to stay here a second longer. Wait. Adrian suddenly spoke, staring fixedly at Noah in Leon's arms, his expression complex. Even if Noah was born by you, he is still my son. You can't just take him away like this. Your son? Leon raised an eyebrow, his tone full of sarcasm. A father who sent the mother of his biological son to a mental hospital? A blind fool who treats the woman who stole his son as a treasure. Adrian, what qualifies you to be his father? Leon's words pierced the heart with every syllable. Adrian's body swayed, almost unable to stand. I didn't know. I really didn't know. He murmured, as if explaining to me, and as if convincing himself. Now, you know. I looked at him indifferently. So, take your first love and disappear from my sight. As for Noah's custody, my lawyer will contact you. Of course, you can choose to go to court, I'll accompany you to the end. But I advise you not to, because on the court day, you might receive another subpoena from the prosecutor's office. Adrian's face completely lost all color. He knew I wasn't joking. With the Shin family backing me, he had no chance of winning. He could only watch helplessly as we took his biological son and walked past him, leaving triumphantly. He had lost, utterly defeated. I brought Noah back to the Shin family ancestral home. It was a vast Chinese-style garden with pavilions and towers, antique and elegant, the place where I grew up. The Shin family elders all had red eyes upon seeing me. Grandpa and Grandma held my hand, repeatedly saying it's good to be back. My parents were full of guilt. After I was kidnapped back then, they mobilized all forces to search, but only found my torn clothes and a pool of blood. Everyone thought I was already dead. No one expected that I was rescued by the Gu family, but lost my memory as a result, treated as an ordinary orphan, and eventually married Adrian by a twist of fate, starting another nightmare. And the Gu family, who clearly knew my identity was not simple back then, deliberately concealed my existence to curry favor with another power, treating me as a sacrificial pawn. Dad, Mom, it's all in the past. I comforted them. Haven't I come back safe and sound? I didn't want them immersed in past regrets. Right now, the most important thing is Noah. Noah was filled with fear toward this strange environment. He clung tightly to Leon's neck, refusing to come down or speak. I knew this couldn't be rushed. Vivian had been by his side for 3 years, already planting a deep-rooted mother image in his heart. What I needed to do was slowly, with love and patience, make him accept me again. In the evening, I personally cooked several cartoon-themed meals that Noah might like. Carrying the tray, I entered his room. He was sitting on the carpet playing with building blocks, with Leon accompanying him. Upon seeing me enter, he immediately stopped, looking at me warily. Noah, time to eat. I placed the tray on the small table and gave him a gentle smile. He glanced at the cute octopus sausages and panda rice balls, swallowed, but stubbornly turned his head away, ignoring me. Bad woman, took away mommy, he muttered softly. Children's words are innocent, yet they stabbed my heart like knives. Leon furrowed his brows, about to say something, but I stopped him with a look. I wasn't angry, I just sat beside Noah and said softly, I'm not a bad woman, I am your mommy. That auntie is sick, so she said many lies to deceive you. You're lying. Mommy isn't sick. Noah refuted excitedly, it's you. You took mommy away. I didn't. I explained patiently, Noah, look at me, then at Uncle, do you think we look like you? Noah was stunned, he looked at me, then at Leon, a trace of confusion appearing in his grape-like big black eyes. The Shin family members all have outstanding appearances, especially the eyes, beautiful peach blossom eyes. Noah's eyes were exactly like mine and Leon's, as if carved from the same mold. His little mind seemed unable to process such complex information. He pursed his lips and stopped talking. I pushed the tray closer to him. Eat first, okay? If you don't eat, you won't grow tall. He hesitated, but ultimately couldn't resist the temptation of the food, picked up the small spoon, and ate in small bites. Watching his obedient eating, my heart softened. My child, I've finally found him back. No matter how difficult, I will heal the trauma in his heart and let him return to my embrace. In the following days, I pushed aside all matters and devoted myself to accompanying Noah. I took him to the amusement park, the aquarium, the science museum. I told him bedtime stories, played building blocks with him, and drew pictures. I showed him photos from our childhood, telling him he is a piece of flesh fallen from my body, the little treasure our whole family has long awaited. Noah is very smart, although he couldn't fully understand everything yet, he could feel our unreserved love for him. He no longer called me bad woman, though he still refused to call me mommy, but he was willing to let me hold him and share his little toys with me. This was a good start. At the same time, the Shin family's reckoning with the Gu and Su families proceeded methodically. Under multiple blows from the Shin family, the Gu group's stock price plummeted, several major projects were halted, the capital chain broke, and it was on the verge of bankruptcy. Adrian was overwhelmed, seeking help everywhere but hitting walls at every turn. Everyone knew he had offended the capital Shin family, no one dared to lend him a hand at this time. The Su family fared worse. Vivian's father had risen through improper means, with unstable foundations. Leon merely moved his finger slightly, and tax, industry and commerce, and fire departments took turns visiting, uncovering countless issues. Howard was taken away for investigation. The Su enterprise collapsed overnight. Vivian, suspected of child trafficking and intentional injury, was formally arrested. Awaiting her was a long prison sentence. That day, I received an unexpected call from Adrian. His voice sounded utterly exhausted, with a hint of desperate pleading. "Sherry, I beg you, spare the Gu family. My dad, he had a stroke from anger and is hospitalized. That's what he deserves." My voice had no fluctuation. "I know I was wrong, I really know." He choked. "I don't ask for your forgiveness, I just beg you to let me see Noah, just one glance, okay? Do you think you still qualify to see him now? He is my son. My blood flows in him." He shouted excitedly. "So what?" I sneered. "From the moment you chose to believe Vivian and sent me to the mental hospital, you forever lost the qualification to be his father." "Sherry." He was almost roaring. "Do you have to be so ruthless?" "Ruthless?" I retorted. "Adrian, touch your conscience and ask, compared to the suffering I endured these 3 years, what you're going through now counts for nothing. I'm just taking back what was mine, and collecting a little interest along the way." I didn't want to waste more words with him and hung up directly. But I didn't expect him to do something so crazy. That afternoon, while I was flying a kite with Noah in our garden, a car suddenly crashed through the estate's barrier like out of control, heading straight toward us. It was Adrian. His eyes blood red, face ferocious, like a beast driven to desperation, making a final struggle. Everything happened too fast. I instinctively held Noah tightly in my arms, using my back to face the huge impact. "Sherry." "Miss." Leon and the bodyguard's heart-wrenching shouts rang in my ears. The anticipated intense pain didn't come. A black SUV inserted itself at an incredible angle, fiercely colliding with Adrian's car. The two cars crashed, emitting a deafening boom. Holding Noah, I was unharmed. The SUV that saved us had its front completely deformed, billowing thick smoke. Leon and the bodyguards rushed over, forcefully opening the door. When I saw the bloodied man in the driver's seat, I froze entirely. Rex. Rex was severely injured, 3 broken ribs, a fractured left leg, and severe concussion. When he was sent to the hospital for emergency treatment, Leon's face was so dark it could drip water. "Brother, he'll be fine, right?" I grabbed Leon's arm, my voice trembling. Rex was trying to save me. "Don't worry, I'll have the best experts in the hospital consult on him." Leon patted my hand, a flash of ruthlessness in his eyes. "As for Adrian, he's tired of living." Adrian was arrested on the spot for attempted intentional homicide. The Gu family was completely finished. Upon hearing the news, Patrick couldn't catch his breath and died directly in the hospital bed. The Gu group, leaderless, was divided up by several companies and thoroughly became history. I stayed at the hospital guarding Rex for 3 days and nights. he finally woke from the coma. Seeing me, he grinned wanting to laugh, but pulled his wound, grimacing in pain. "Sister Sherry, are you okay?" His first words were still asking about me. My tears instantly fell. "I'm fine, how do you feel?" "I won't die." He smiled weakly, "Just a pity about my car, I just had it modified." I was amused by him, crying and laughing. Leon walked in, followed by a lawyer. He said to Rex, "The Shin family remembers your life-saving grace. This is the transfer agreement for 30% shares of the Shin Group's security company. Additionally, all your medical and subsequent rehabilitation expenses will be borne by us." Rex was stunned, he didn't expect such a big reward. "Leon, this is too much. You saved my sister and my nephew, this is just a token of our appreciation." Leon's tone brooked no refusal. "When you're recovered, welcome to serve as chief advisor at Shin Security." Rex knew Leon's temperament and didn't refuse further, solemnly thanking him. After Leon and the lawyer left, only the two of us remained in the ward. Rex looked at me and suddenly said, "Sister Sherry, there's something I don't know if I should tell you." "What is it?" "About Vivian. I found some other things." He paused, seeming to organize his words. "Her approaching Adrian back then might not have been accidental." My heart stirred. "What do you mean?" "I found that before you were kidnapped and lost your memory, drifting to that city, Vivian had contact with Adrian. Moreover, she seemed to know the group that kidnapped you back then." Rex said gravely, "I suspect that your amnesia back then, and the Gu family's deliberate concealment, all have her shadow behind them. She likely was plotting from the very beginning." Rex's words were like lightning, splitting open the fog of my memory. I had always thought Vivian was just a vain, unscrupulous woman. But if what Rex said is true, then her scheming is far deeper than I imagined. She wasn't intercepting midway but had planned everything from the start. She first made me disappear, then appeared by Adrian's side as a savior, step by step stealing my life, my lover, even my child. A chill rose from my spine. This woman is too terrifying. "Do you have this evidence?" I asked. "Some clues, but not complete yet." Rex said, "That group of kidnappers was silenced back then, clues are hard to find. But rest assured, as long as she did it, there will be traces left." "Good." I nodded, my gaze becoming firm again. "Rex, recover well, leave the rest to me." I left the ward and dialed Leon's phone. "Brother, arrange for me, I want to see Vivian." In the detention center's meeting room, I saw Vivian. She was in prison uniform, without any makeup, revealing her ordinary face. Without the enhancement of branded clothes and exquisite makeup, she looked haggard and aged, the light in her eyes extinguished, leaving only lifeless gray. Upon seeing me, a trace of venomous flame ignited in her ashen eyes. "Sherry. You bitch. What are you here for? To see me as a joke?" She slapped the table excitedly. I looked at her calmly, unaffected by her anger. "I came to ask you a few questions." "I have nothing to say to you." She turned her head away. "Is that so?" I said leisurely, "About the kidnapping case 7 years ago at the abandoned factory in the west of the city, you don't want to talk about that either?" Vivian's body shuddered violently, she abruptly turned her head, looking at me incredulously. How do you know?" "I not only know, but I also know that the leader of that kidnapping group was your distant cousin, right?" I stared into her eyes, not missing any change in her expression. Her face instantly turned pale. You're talking nonsense." She was still being stubborn. "Whether I'm talking nonsense, you know in your heart." I placed a document in front of her. "Although your cousin is dead, his wife and child are still alive. I found them. They were very willing to chat with me about how you cried and begged your cousin back then to teach a lesson to the girl who stole the man you fancied." Vivian looked at the document with photos of her cousin's wife and child, her psychological defenses finally collapsed completely. "No. It wasn't like that." She incoherently defended, I was just jealous of you. Why do you have everything, good family background, beautiful looks, everyone likes you. And I was just an ugly duckling from the countryside. That day at the art exhibition, I fell for Adrian at first sight, but his eyes only had you. I wasn't reconciled. I just wanted you to disappear for a while, I didn't want you to die. Her voice grew more agitated, spilling out the events of that year. It turned out she had set her sights on Adrian from the beginning. To get him, she instigated her thug cousin to kidnap me, wanting to teach me a lesson. Unexpectedly, the kidnappers mishandled, causing severe head trauma and my memory loss. And the Gu family, after rescuing me, discovered my true identity but chose to conceal it because the other family they were trying to curry favor with at the time was a mortal enemy of the Shin family. Thus, the Gu family played along, erasing traces of my existence, turning me into a parentless orphan Sherry. Meanwhile, Vivian took advantage of the opportunity, appearing as Adrian's high school crush first love, easily capturing Adrian who already had some fondness for her. Everything was a meticulously planned scam, a 7-year-long scheme to steal a life. So, even my being sent to the mental hospital was part of your plan? I asked the last question. Vivian gave a miserable laugh, yes. I knew you were pregnant and that Adrian couldn't give up the Gu family's bloodline. I couldn't wait anymore, I was afraid you'd recover your memory. So, I forged a case of my leukemia relapse, telling him only your bone marrow could save me. I knew, with his guilt toward me, he would definitely agree. I just didn't expect you to be so resilient, not dying in 3 years. She looked at me, her eyes full of malicious glee, but now this is fine too. If I'm not well, don't think you'll be well either. Adrian personally sent you to hell for me, even if you win, there will always be a thorn in your heart. Ha ha ha. She laughed maniacally, like a true madwoman. I looked at her quietly, without anger or sadness, only feeling immense absurdity. So, my 7 years of displacement and 3 years of hellish torment all stemmed from a woman's ridiculous jealousy. I stood up, looking down at her. You're wrong, Vivian. My voice was calm and indifferent, there won't be a thorn in my heart. Because trash like Adrian doesn't even qualify to leave a thorn in my heart. As for you, stay here and properly repent your filthy life. I turned and left, leaving her screams and curses far behind. Sunlight shone in from the window at the end of the corridor, warm and bright. Everything was over.